Distinguished guests, good evening. Welcome to tonight's talk, organized by the Peloponnesian Association with the initiative and sponsorship of Mr. Christos Krias and Rhodes Hotel. The Agogí was the rigorous education and training regimen mandated for all male Spartan citizens, except for the firstborn son of the ruling houses. The training involved learning stealth, cultivating loyalty to the Spartan group, military training, for example, pain tolerance, hunting, dancing, singing, and social communicating preparation. According to folklore, Agogí was introduced by the semi-mythical Spartan lawgiver Lycurgos, but its origins are thought to be between the 7th and the 6th centuries BC, when the state trained male citizens from the ages of 7 to 21. The men would become the walls of Sparta, because Sparta was the only Greek city with no defensive walls after they had been demolished at the order of Lycurgos. The Agogí was prestigious throughout the Greek world, and many aristocratic families from other cities vied to send their sons to Sparta to participate in the Agogí for varying periods of time. Referring to the story of the young Spartan, which you see in your program, we cannot but wonder about the persistence, perseverance, and endurance that the young man showed. And indeed, we cannot easily comprehend the deeper meaning of the story. Many questions arise. What was the point of such harsh education? What installed young Spartans with the courage to obey strict rules for the benefit of the city? These and other questions on the social behavior, philosophy, and politics will be answered tonight by our speaker, Dr. Chrysanth Gallou. Dr. Gallou is Associate Professor in Archaeology and Co-Director of the Center for Spartan and Peloponnesian Studies at the University of Nottingham. She has written extensively on Aegean archaeology, the archaeology of childhood, and the archaeology of Laconia and the Peloponnese, including the now submerged prehistoric town at Pavlopetri. In 2005, she published her first book on the Mycenaean cult of the dead. She recently completed her research project on the Mycenaean tombs at Epidorus Limera, southern Laconia, which has been funded by the Institute of Aegean Prehistory in STAP, the J.F. Kostopoulos Foundation, the Shelby White and Leon Levy Program for Archaeological Publications, and the Mediterranean Archaeological Trust, and the results are currently being published in her new book, Rethinking Mycenaean Chamber Tombs, A View from Laconia. Dr. Gallou has co-organized several international conferences and has co-edited their proceedings, including Sparta and the Laconia from Prehistory to Pre-Modern Times in 2009, In the Past, the Significance of Memory and Tradition in the Transmission of Culture, also in 2009, The Archaeology of Cult and Death in 2006, and the forthcoming Sacred Landscapes in the Peloponnese from Prehistory to Modern Times. She is currently writing a new book on tiny archaeologies, the archaeology of children and childhood in Mycenaean Greece. And she is setting up a new international interdisciplinary research project on Spartan sanctuaries under the auspices of the British School of Athens. She aims to make Greek archaeology more accessible to children in Greece and abroad, and has set up an educational project on the prehistoric town at Pavlopetri and on the symbolism of the Tyrian purple color from prehistory to nowadays. She is also archaeological consultant to Sarantos Minopetros' forthcoming children's books, are Sunday and the Sea Garlanded City, My Name is Royal Purple, and Leonidas, the Obedient King. And now, without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Gallou to speak.
Mr. Domestica, Consul of Greece, honorable audience, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor and pleasure to be among fellow Peloponnesians, fellow Hellenes and Philhellenes this evening, and I would like first to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Lena Markou and the Managing Committee of the Peloponnesian Association of Great Britain for their kind invitation and for organizing this lovely evening. This event has been made possible through the unfailing support and sponsorship of Mr. Christos Krias, whom I wholeheartedly thank, and I would also like to extend my gratitude to his wife, Maria, for their warm hospitality. I shall start my lecture today with some brief introduction to the Center for Spartan and Peloponnesian Studies at the University of Nottingham, which I co-direct since 2012. The center was established in 2006 at the University of Nottingham by two Philhellene professors, Professor Bill Kavanagh, an archaeologist, and Professor Steve Hodkinson, a historian, and it's unique in its kind and aims, which have put the study and promotion of the history, the archaeology, and culture of Sparta and the Peloponnese in the forefront of academic research worldwide. The center runs a regular series of research seminars and lectures with distinguished invited speakers from UK, Greece, and abroad. It organizes international conferences and symposia on various aspects of Sparta and the Peloponnese, and publishes their proceedings. We take great pride on the quality and international impact of our scholarly publications, which include a large number of books on Sparta, but also on other regions in the Peloponnese, including the most recent ones on Sparta and Laconia from prehistory to pre-modern, and Sparta in modern thought, politics, history, and culture. They also include the forthcoming edited volume, Sacred Landscapes in the Peloponnese, from prehistory to modern times, as well as the final publication of the Center's research projects on the important Laconian prehistoric sites at Koufounou, and I'm showing you just two important finds from the site. Koufounou has been identified with prehistoric Sparta. It is located just outside the modern town of Sparti at the site called Alessia, and it was excavated by the other director of the center, Professor Bill Kavanagh, in collaboration with the University of Liverpool and the French School at Athens. Also, the results of my recent project on the chamber tombs at Epidaurou Limyra on the Malea Peninsula in southern Laconia, which is the site that introduced the new burial tradition of the Mycenaean chamber tomb on the Greek mainland on the 17th century and BC, and this actually changes completely our idea on the introduction of this type of tomb and this type of burial tradition on the Greek mainland by the Mycenaeans. And also, we are currently working on the publication of the survey and small-scale excavation that the University of Nottingham, under the auspices of the British School at Athens, has carried out at the now submerged city at Pavlopetri, which has been now proved to be the oldest submerged city in the world, and it is located just opposite the island of Elafonisos in southern Laconia. You may have already seen the project's documentary called Pavlopetri, City Beneath the Waves, which aired in BBC Two in October 2011, achieving viewing figures of 2.03 million. A North American version of the documentary debuted on the Discovery Channel in June 2012, and it has so far been shown in a further 20 countries, with estimated consolidated viewing figures of more than 15 million worldwide. And we take great pride that we have these projects because we promote the cultural significance of Laconia, the Peloponnese, and Greece to the wider public. The center has also a strong commitment towards public archaeology. We have set up and successfully run educational projects in collaboration with schools in Greece and in the UK on the Submets town and Pavlo Petri. We run projects more or less near the site. We don't take the kids into the sea where the remains lie, but we also go to schools and do presentation and work with the children so they can learn more about our cultural heritage. And also, we're currently setting up a project on the Tyrian purple color. You may have heard of the Spartan Phoeniki, the scarlet red cloak that the Spartans were wearing, and also of the ancient island Porphyrousa, the purple island, which is identified with the beautiful island of Kythera off the southern coast of Laconia. We are also lucky to have in-house our own children's book writer, Mr. Sarantos Minopetros, a Laconian himself from Agios Nikolaos Vion, who is now completing his 2 books that are linked to our educational projects. The first one is called Arasantoi and the Sea Garlanded City. And also, my name is Royal Purple, and we are also hoping to have this one produced as a film for children. We're working on it at the moment. His next book will be on Leonidas, the obedient king. And this is actually, I've included this poem because it's going to be included in the book. I should mention that the books will be produced both in English and in Greek. And this book will accompany the center's forthcoming educational project on the Spartans. Mr. Minopetros is, as a matter of fact, with us today, so if you want to find out more about his books, you can talk to him after the lecture during the reception. Recently, Professor Steve Hodkinson, the center's other director, has served as historical consultant to Kieron Gillen's graphic novel 3, which centers around 3 fugitive helots. These were the slaves of the Spartans, and is set in the period of Spartans' decline in 360s BC. Its title purposefully evokes the mythologized Sparta of Frank Miller's and Jacques Snyder's 300. I'm sure you have seen the film. But Kieron Gillen's aim is a more authentic depiction of ancient Sparta, focusing in particular on the exploitation of the helots and the latter's capacity for subversive agency. Moving on, next year, the center will be celebrating the decennial anniversary of its successful activity with an international conference on luxury and wealth in the Peloponnese from the Archaic to the Hellenistic period. This is the period from the 7th to the 1st century BC, and it will be held at Nottingham. And also an international symposium on the origins of the Olympic Games at Olympia, to coincide with the Rio 2016 Olympic Games. Of course, you are all more than welcome to attend these events should you wish to. My paper today stems out of the center's new ambitious international interdisciplinary research project on Spartan sanctuaries, and this is actually the first time that we are announcing it outside the university, and I'm really happy to share this news with you, which I shall be leading with Professor Steve Hodkinson under the auspices of the British School at Athens. In brief, this new project aims at bringing together and making digitally accessible the archaeological material from the early British excavations in the famous Spartan sanctuaries of Artemis of Thea, of Athena Chalkikos. This is the so-called Parthenon of the Spartans, the Menelaion, which was the sanctuary of Menelaus and Helen at Therapni, the Achillion, the Eleusinion, the Leonideon, or else known as the Temple of Apollo Carnios, the altar of Lycurgus, the sanctuary of Zeus Messapeus, the Astravachus monument, and the sanctuary on the Megalopolis road. It has not been identified as the sacred place of any specific deity so far. And also, this new project aims to reconstruct the lives of the ancient Spartans from birth through childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood, to old age, through the study of the material culture and the votive offerings found in these sanctuaries. And this is the first time that we're going to have a more accurate insight into the lives of the ancient Spartans. From antiquity to present day, the city of Sparta has been invariously the model of discipline, obedience, and virtue, and of conformity and tyranny. Greek and Roman authors, followed by modern scholars, invariably consider Sparta at the peak of its power and prestige. Then this is the period from around 550 to 370 BC, unique and atypical among Greek city-states for the way the state controlled virtually every single aspect of a citizen's life from birth to death. The state-run educational system has been considered since antiquity the cornerstone of the distinctive Spartan way of life. The extant sources describe a complicated system of grades for boys spanning the years from childhood. The boy was taken from its parents at the age of 7 to early adulthood, during which they were inculcated with the Spartan virtues of aggression and blind obedience in a number of violent contests, the most famous of which was the contest of endurance, the renowned ritual flagellation beside the altar of Artemis or Thea. The tale of the Spartan boy that was eaten alive by a fox while he was hiding it under its cloak and refused to reveal that he had stolen it remains to date one of the most famous stories of endurance we have inherited since antiquity. According to the tale that has been included in Plutarch's Life of Lycurgus, one day a Spartan boy stole a fox cub. Unfortunately for him, he was spotted running away and arrested. Before they caught him, he hid the cub inside his cloth. The boy was asked to turn over the animal. The boy's reply was, of course, "Fox cub? What fox cub? I don't know anything about an animal." The interrogation went on and on, for he knew the boy had stolen it. Suddenly, the boy fell down, dead. When the boy's body was examined, it was discovered that the cub had torn out the boy's guts with its teeth and claws while he was being questioned. The boy, however, had never led on to his suffering or given in to the questioning, even though it cost him his life. In another version of the same story, in Plutarch's Sayings of Spartans, before the boy died, he told the other children, who advised him that it would be better to let the fox be seen than to hide it even unto death. It is said that he responded, "Not so, but better to die without yielding to the pain than through being detected because of weakness of spirit to gain a life to be lived in disgrace." This anecdote alludes to one of, if not the strangest and most difficult to explain, educational practices in ancient Greece. The fact that during their education, Spartan boys were compelled to cheat and steal. The fox, a symbol of trickery in ancient myths, is properly linked to this Spartan custom. The ancient literary sources we possess on the practice of the custom amount to Xenophon, Isocrates, who perhaps make a reference to the former, Plutarch, who draws information from Xenophon or Aristotle and Heraclides Lembos. According to Xenophon's Lacedaemonian Politia, which provides the only systematic account of Spartan education, Lycurgus, the wise Spartan lawgiver, prescribed that the young Spartans should be lightly dressed, even during winter, go around barefoot, and starve. The valuable sources, though, do not explain at all how Spartan boys were trained to become thieves and cheaters. From what is made clear, a special theft was practiced by the pedes, namely the 7-year-old boys. In the classical period, they were sent out to the wild, perhaps at dawn or even during the night, looking for food which they stole, yet obeying certain fixed rules. However, whipping was inflicted upon them if they were caught stealing. In Hellenistic times, the organization of educational theft was further elaborated by the presence of an Iren, a 20-year-old man who sent the boys out to steal food and wood for the preparation of what appeared to have been his own meal. The other sources add nothing else to this picture, neither Aristotle nor Plutarch. Although complicated and not perfectly clear in the superposition of the different elements, Plutarch's chapter 17 of the life of Lycurgus provides us with precious details about the Hellenistic organization of the Syssitia. These were the common meals, food and stealing under the guidance of this Irena. And I quote what Plutarch says. This Iren, then, a youth of 20 years, commands his subordinates in their mimic battles, and indoors makes them serve him at his meals. He commissions the older ones to fetch wood, and the smaller ones pot herbs. And they steal what they fetch, some of them entering the gardens, and others creeping rightly, slyly, and cautiously into the public messes of the men. But if a boy is caught stealing, he is soundly flogged as a careless and unskillful thief. They steal too whatever food they can, and learn to be adept in setting upon people when asleep or off their guard. But the boy who is caught gets a flogging and must go hungry, for the meals allowed to them are scanty, in order that they may take it into their own hands, the fight against hunger, and so be forced into boldness and cunning. Careless theft is also punished here by whipping, although not interpreted in a military way. Thus, ancient texts seek not to describe the custom, but rather to explain it as to its meaning and aims, modeling their interpretation in the form of a positive or a negative judgment. In chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Lacedaemonians, where the education of the pedes is dealt with, Xenophon describes Lycurgus' rules about their diet, and I quote, "As to the food, Lycurgus required the prefect to bring with him such a moderate amount of it that the boys would never suffer from repletion and would know what it was to go with their hunger unsatisfied. For he believed that those who underwent this training would be better able to continue working on an empty stomach, if necessary, and would be capable of carrying on longer without extra food if the word of command were given to do so. They would want fewer delicacies and would accommodate themselves more readily to anything put before them, and at the same time would enjoy better health. He also thought that a diet which made their bodies slim would do more to increase their height than one that consisted of flesh-forming food." As opposed to what was the norm in other city-states, including Athens, the lawgiver ordered that the amount of food of children should be small so as to achieve two main aims, a physical and a psychological one. Food that made their bodies slim and increased their height was preferred to a flesh-forming diet. The young Spartans who underwent such hardship would be capable of resisting hunger and of carrying on longer with their hunger unsatisfied if the word of command was given to do so. Moreover, they would wish for fewer delicacies and would accommodate themselves more readily to anything put before them. So, meager portions became a test of physical and psychological resistance. In Xenophon's treatment of the topic, theft is introduced as a measure useful to alleviate hunger. However, stealing was not uncontrollable, but instead submitted to certain rules, therefore allowed by the lawgiver. In few lines below, this kind of educational theft becomes a virtue, good, an agathon. Thus, a great part of the text is reserved to the justification of the practice, rather than its description, that is, to the explanation of Lycurgus' aims. Needing a cunning organization with watching and spying, deceiving and lying, stealing food would make boys more resourceful and better for war. What is strange and difficult to understand, though, is that the young thief was brutally punished if caught. Xenophon's justification of this incoherent element follows a logical, almost pre-Stoic scheme. If Lycurgus considered theft a virtue, an agathon as he mentions, it means that he deemed its bad usage, bad theft, kakos kleptontas, a vice. Still, another explanation of the lawgiver's pedagogical aims. As Xenophon himself explains, teachers always punish those who carry out their instructions falsely. Accordingly, they punish those who are caught for stealing badly. And I quote his text. However, so that they might not be so gnawed by hunger, without authorizing them to take what they lacked without warring, Lycurgus permitted them to steal, the wherewithal to ward hunger off. I think that everyone realizes that it was not because he did not know what to give them to eat that he allowed them to manage in this way. It is clear that someone who wants to steal must stay awake at night and must scheme and remain on the lookout during the day, and that anyone who wants to help himself to something must also post spies. In any case, clearly, his intention was to make the boys more astute in procuring necessities, and thus train them to be better warriors. Why then, someone might ask, if he considered stealing to be a good thing, did he give a sound beating to anyone that was caught? My reply in that, in all kinds of education, is that the disobedient pupil is punished. So it is at Sparta. Those who are caught because they have stolen badly are punished. In the same way, while deciding that it would be fine to snatch as many cheeses as possible at the sanctuary of Artemis or Thea, Lycurgus prescribed that others should whip the thieves. By this, too, he wished to demonstrate that a short period of suffering can bring about long-lasting glory. This also demonstrates that when speed is absolutely necessary, he also acts sluggishly. Far from gaining advantage by it, on the contrary, incurs the maximum difficulties. End of quotation. Heraclides' Lemvos passage of the 2nd century BC is drawn from Aristotle's constitution of Lacedaemonians, who in all probability used Xenophon as his own ultimate renowned source, and he states, "They feed the children in such a way that they are never full, so that they learn to endure hunger. They also teach them to steal and punish with blows anyone who lets himself be caught, to make them better able to endure fatigue and lack of sleep in the face of the enemy. From childhood, small Spartans learn to speak briefly, and then both to joke and to be the subject of jokes." In the constitution of the Lacedaemonians, a military aim appears to be the inextricable link between theft and education. Similarly, in Book 4 of Xenophon's Anavasi, two different military tactics are compared, namely the open field battle, fought with courage and energy, and the more economical, indirect conquest of a military aim, obtained by deceiving the enemy. The vocabulary of this kind of attack and conquest, being identical to that used for theft, offers Xenophon and Chrysophos from Sparta the chance of joking about educational theft in Sparta as opposed to the stealing of public money at Athens. And I quote, with Xenophon saying, "But why would I be the man to make suggestions about stealing?" Xenophon represents the Athenians. "For as I hear, Chrysophos, you Lacedaemonians, at least those among you who belong to the peers, practice stealing even from childhood, and count it not disgraceful, but honorable, to steal anything that the law does not prevent you from taking. And in order that you may steal with all possible skill, and may try not to be caught at it, it is the law of your land, that if you are caught stealing, you are flogged. Now, therefore, it's just the time for you to display your training and to take care that we do not get caught stealing any of the mountain, so that we shall not get a beating." "Well, for all that," said Chrysophos, "I hear on my side that you Athenians are terribly clever at stealing the public funds, even though the danger is terribly great for the stealer, and in fact that your best people do it most, at least if they really are your best who are deemed worthy to rule. Hence, it is time for you also to be displaying your training." The stealing military verbs employed in the ancient texts are klepto, arpazo, lanthano, and aliskome. Xenophon further introduces as a virtue, as an agathon, the theft of what is not forbidden by the law, that is, the stealing made legal by the law, an act which is punished by lashes only if it is carried out badly. This is what Xenophon says to the Chrysophos, exhorting him to show the results of his Spartan education in the present military situation. As you can see, nothing new if compared to Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Lacedaemonians, that is, the consideration of successful stealing for military aims as a virtue. Xenophon's justification has a counterpoint with the condemnation present in other sources. In order to attack Sparta and its customs, Isocrates, not surprisingly, chose to consider this custom. In his Panathinaikos, Lycurgus' militarized theft becomes instead a vicious practice. It's called hunting, supposedly by the parents of the boys, and passionately adopted by Spartan citizens. And I quote his passage. "Were I to go through all of these practices, I should greatly fatigue both myself and my hearers. But if I mention only a single one which they cherish most and by which they set more store, I think that I can put before you the whole manner of life. For every day they sent out their boys, from the very cradle, as it were, with such companions as each may prefer, ostensibly to hunt, but in reality to steal, the property of the people who live in the country. In this practice, those who are caught are punished with fines and blows, while those who have accomplished the greatest number of thefts and have been able to escape detention enjoy a higher esteem among their fellow youths than the others. And when they attain to manhood, provided they remain true to the ways they were practiced in youth, they are in line for the most important offices." End of quotation. In this text, bad theft is also punished, but not only by lashes, but also by paying a fine. However, good thieves are rewarded with the highest honors in the future. Isocrates' polemic against Xenophon appears in the criticism of the positive judgment of the theft. What is agathon or semnon in such a negative, shameful practice? He asks rhetorically. And he responds, "The Spartans who have adopted the boys' theft are out of the common morality, recognized and shared by Greek and barbarians, and the people who admire them are crazy." Xenophon's justification is here substituted by moral condemnation. Isocrates' censure is radical and concerned not only the Spartans, but also those Greeks who admire them, both expulsed from the whole mankind. The Spartans as out of the moral world of both Greeks and even barbarians, the rest of the Greeks as no more provided of logos, namely being irrational. To sum up, theft in Sparta was forbidden, but authorized and even approved, if successfully practiced for the boys of a certain educational class. Of course, the Spartan had adopted legal measures against theft, for Xenophon alludes in passing to a law which prevents aposterin, wrongfully depriving someone of property. Thus, and I quote, "A man who would not leave unpaid debts of gratitude, which are not recoverable in the courts, cannot have been minded to commit thefts that are forbidden by law." And Agesilaus held it wrong not only to repudiate the debt of gratitude, but having greater means, not to render in return a much greater kindness. Again, with what show of reason could embezzlement of public property be charged against a man who bestowed on his fatherland the rewards due to himself? And is it not a striking proof of his freedom from avarice that he was able to get money from others whenever he wanted for the purpose of rendering financial assistance to the state or his friends? For had he been in the habit of selling his favors or taking payment for his benefactions, no one would have felt that he owed him anything. It is the recipient of unbought, gratuitous benefits who is always glad to oblige his benefactor in return for the kindness he has received, and in acknowledgement of the trust reposed in him as a worthy and faithful guardian of a favor. But neither he nor any other author provide details, so that we know nothing whatsoever about the distinction between the different types of stealing and related penalties. We may nonetheless presume that the Spartan law on theft was not different from the Athenian one. In the above formulation, that is, theft was forbidden but authorized and even approved, we have in fact different levels of social distinction, approval, or interdiction. Legally forbidden, theft was, however, accepted in Sparta under certain circumstances. It possessed a legal status at the city, and not only there, but also an anthropological and consequently a religious one, which were very different from it. In chapter 2, where Xenophon introduces the notion of educational theft of food, he makes allusion to the ritual stealing of cheese that the young boys took from upon the altar of Artemis or Thea, and he ends praising the glory of the winners. The boys tried to snatch as many cheese as possible, prevented by other boys holding whips and sticks. And I quote his words. "And while he means Lycurgus, ruled that it should be accounted honorable to snatch as many cheeses as possible from Orthia, he ordered others to beat these, that is, the stealers of cheese. Here again, he wished to make it evident that it is possible, at the cost of brief pain, to enjoy good repute for a long time." The rite had perhaps its aetion, its origin, in a situation described by the Spartan poet Alcman in some lines where a female deity, most probably Artemis, prepares cheese made of lioness milk for god Hermes during a feast on the mountains. Time and again meet the mountain tops, when the gods take their pleasure in the torch-lit festival, you have carried, and he means Artemis, have carried a great can of the sort that shepherds carry, but all of gold and filled by your fair hand with the milk of a lioness, and therefore had made a great cheese, whole and unbroken and shining white. Of course, Hermes, who established his status as god by stealing Apollo's cattle and was honored as the god of thieves, was also venerated in Sparta. Still, ritual stealing was not restricted to ancient Sparta. A story cited by Herodotus describes the ritual stealing of sesame and honey cakes from the temple of Artemis on Samos by Corcyraean children as follows. Periander, the tyrant of Corinth, in order to punish the Corcyraeans for the murder of his 17-year-old Lycophron, sent to Aliatis of Sardis 300 children from Corcyra to be castrated. The Samians, during a stopover of the Corinthians on their island, hid the children from their guards and sat them in the temple of Artemis. The Corinthians, forbidden to take the suppliants from the temple by force, tried to wear them down by starvation. But the Samians lifted the Corinthian siege by instituting a festival in which choruses of maidens and ephebs carried sesame cakes and honey to the goddess. The children from Corcyra hid the food and ate it and were thus saved. This ritual was performed regularly thereafter. Turning to the educational theft in Sparta, we should quote an incipit by Jean Ducas, and I quote, "Of everything which Spartan education imposed on children, stealing is what ancient writers had the most difficulty explaining, and the same goes for us, for modern scholars." It sounds as a successful formula drawn from a book of success. However, can we entirely share it? Was really theft the most embarrassing feature to explain for the ancient writers on Sparta? Was it a scandal? Is it the same for modern scholars? Is Xenophon's explanation, theft to integrate meager portion of food, the true aim of this practice? I cannot imagine about 2,000 boys stealing so much food to really integrate allowed rations without provoking significant social problems. Between military justification, as put forward by Xenophon and Plutarch, and moral condemnation, as put forward by Socrates, is there space for a moral justification of the boys' theft? Yes, in my opinion. I believe that both military justification and moral censure cover, overshadow another, deeper, anthropological meaning of this kind of theft, an initial stage to the long process leading to the introduction to adult life. Stealing, as part of the initiation process moving from childhood to manhood, is attested in the reminiscence of Nestor, the Homeric king of Pylos, who describes an episode of cattle stealing in the Iliad, Book 11. And he said, "I wish I were young again, strong as I was, when we and the Ilians fought over cattle rustling, when I killed Idomeneus, the son of Epirochus of Elis, and we seized his herds in reprisal." Given the appropriate social organization, those of a remarkably young age, even today, may be required to prove their manhood by stealing from another. In Sardinia, for example, the shepherd boy of 9 or 10, who has not yet stolen an animal, is called a sissi who clings to the ashes of the campfire, whereas Bedouin boys first participate in raids around the age of 12. In Crete, in Greece, there is a cardinal wish that goes, "Tonight, he," meaning the newborn boy, "go on a raid." As a matter of fact, in the Cretan highlands, even as recently as the 1980s, wrestling was so integrated into the moral expectations of villagers that young boys raided from older, more powerful livestock owners in order to win them as allies, the idea being that the pluck, daring, and intelligence it takes to successfully raid prove a boy's worthiness and manliness even to his victim. African pastoralists, in particular the Maasai, the Rendil, and the Sabaru, are named as examples here, have initiation rites in which boys are cast out into the wilderness, where, thrust on their own devices, they learn the tasks of responsible manhood: cattle rustling, raiding, killing, and survival in the bush. The Nuer of southern Sudan, who subside entirely on cattle, are also proud raiders. Skill and courage in fighting are reckoned the highest virtues. raiding the most noble as well as the most profitable occupation. Of East African pastoralists generally, we are told that small-scale livestock raiding is a veritable international sport. Cheating and deceiving are not only part of military life, but also of life and survival. In fact, Xenophon himself says that Lycurgus decided to punish bad thieves to make them not only better for war, his own words as πολεμικότερους, but also more resourceful in their efforts to procure food, μηχανικότερους των επιτιδίων. A recent reference to this educational theft is provided by the Barefoot Battalion, a group of 160 orphans who during World War II organized the stealing of food from the enemy and became part of the Greek resistance. Nevertheless, cheating and deceiving are an important part of adult life, as they are the necessary political answer to social conflicts, of course within a controlled process. One of the most important and unanswered problems in education is whether to teach children a purely moral view of life or not, or rather when beginning to teach a more political way of life involving unavoidable lies. Double morality is what Cambyses tries to teach his son Cyrus when he tries to introduce him to life. So, in Xenophon's Chiropedia, the young boy asks the old man which are the best means to overcome enemies. Cambyses outlines the profile of a just man, obedient to laws, who is able at the same time to cheat, deceive, steal, depending on circumstances and antagonists, for instance against animals or enemies, but also against his own friends, if this is done in their own interest. And I quote the passage, "But father," Cyrus answered, "if to do men good and to do men harm were both of them things we ought to learn, surely it would have been better to teach them in actual practice." Then the father said, "My son, we are said that in the days of our forefathers there was such a teacher once. This man did actually teach his boys righteousness in the way you suggest, to lie and not to lie, to cheat and not to cheat, to calumniate and not to calumniate, to be grasping and not grasping. He drew the distinction between our duty to friends and our duty to enemies, and he went further still. He taught men that it was just and right to deceive even a friend for his own good, or steal his property. And with this, he must teach his pupils to practice on one another what he taught them, just as the people of Hellas, we are told, teach lads in the wrestling school to fence and to feint, to train them by their practice with one another. Now, some of his scholars showed some excellent aptitudes for deception and overreaching, and perhaps no lack of taste for common money-making, but they did not even spare their friends, but used their arts on them. And so an unwritten law was framed by which we still abide, binding us to teach our children, as we teach our servants, simply and solely not to lie, and not to cheat, and not to covet, and if they did otherwise to punish them, hoping to make them human and law-abiding citizens. But when they came to manhood, as you have come, then it seemed the risk was over, and it would be time to teach them what is lawful against our enemies. For at your age, we do not believe you will break out into savagery against your fellows with whom you have been knit together since childhood in ties of friendship and respect." When someone asked what boys ought to learn, the Spartan king Agesilaus responded, "That which they will use when they become men." That saying has been constantly quoted by educational experts from this day to today. This method of education is attributed to an ancient pedagogue in which some modern scholars want to see the Spartan lawgiver Lycurgus. Thank you.